I'm friendly with the ladies on The View, but they didn't say anything about this week. Nothing. You know, because it's never been their thing to weigh in on the issues.
Look, did y'all really think we weren't going to talk about Jimmy Kimmel? I mean, have you watched the show over the last 29 seasons? So you know, no one silences.
It looks like Whoopi and The View are scrambling right now, which is honestly pretty funny. Just last week, Bill Maher called them out for avoiding any discussion about Jimmy Kimmel's situation.
I gotta say, and I'm friendly with the ladies on The View, but they didn't say anything about this week. Nothing. You know, because it's never been their thing to weigh in on the issues. It's just, you know, it's just an upbeat party show. That's why they hired people named Joy and Sonny and Whoopi. But no, girls, let me go out strong, okay? It won't kill you. I promise. It's happened to me, and I may go out after this show. We don't know. We don't know.
The View has always stayed on top of the biggest headlines since it first started. Just a few weeks ago, there was even a clip of a former panelist explaining how they sometimes get only a few hours to prepare before jumping into major, controversial topics. That's why it caught people off guard when, right after Jimmy's suspension, the show went live as if they had no idea their own network, ABC, had sidelined him. That moment is exactly what led Bill Maher to criticize them, arguing they were too hesitant to jeopardize their comfortable positions by bringing him up. But here's where it gets interesting. The hosts eventually did speak out, and what they said might surprise you.
Really think we weren't going to talk about Jimmy Kimmel? I mean, have you watched the show over the last 29 seasons? So you know, no one silences us. And to all my friends in Italy who reached out, you have to know it's okay. We're still here. We're still broadcasting. And when the news broke last week about Jimmy Kimmel's suspension, we took a breath to see if Jimmy was going to say anything about it first. We did the same thing with Stephen Colbert.
That's not accurate. And here's why they eventually chose to address Jimmy Kimmel. The idea that they held off to hear his side, or that they did the same during Stephen Colbert's controversy, just doesn't hold up. If you look back, right after Colbert's situation made headlines, The View jumped in almost immediately. There was no waiting around for an official statement. They shared their takes right away. And realistically, when has Whoopi Goldberg or the panel ever held back their opinions for anyone? Pretty much never, so that explanation doesn't really add up. But instead of dragging it out, let's get to the clip and see what actually happened.
Our show was on tape on Friday, but we are live here today, and we're getting into it now. Okay? Because to be clear, you cannot like a show. Now, I want to make sure I got this right. To be clear, you cannot like a show and it can go off the air. Mm-hmm. Someone can say something they shouldn't and get taken off the air, but the government cannot apply pressure to force someone to be silent.
Did you notice how unusually cautious Whoopi Goldberg sounded while reading that statement? It almost came off as comical, like she was worried that even a small slip could cause trouble or jeopardize her position. That's pretty different from how she usually delivers things, which made the contrast stand out even more. Then there's the twist. Jimmy Kimmel is already back on ABC, making the whole situation look more like a brief pause than anything major. That timing makes it seem like The View only decided to speak up once it was clear he'd be returning, playing it safe until there was no real risk involved. And of course, Bill Maher didn't hold back, continuing to call them out over it.
The FCC says they're going to go after maybe next The View. They got a new show lined up. It's going to be great. It's called Morning Wood with James Wood.
Bill Maher didn't hold back at all. He openly mocked The View, joking that they could be next in line after Jimmy Kimmel's suspension and might even get replaced with new programming. And honestly, it's a thought that's crossed a lot of minds. To be fair, this isn't about calling for the show to be cancelled. Whether people love it or not, The View has secured its spot in daytime TV. The real issue is how often they react too quickly, running with headlines before fully verifying them, sometimes stretching details or amplifying controversies before all the facts are clear. That kind of approach doesn't come across as bold. It feels careless. If anything, this situation could be a wake-up call. No one's saying the show needs to go away, but it might be time to take accuracy more seriously. Because if they keep being loose with the facts, Maher's jab might stop sounding like a joke and start feeling like a real possibility. He didn't stop there, either. He also took a swipe at Kimmel.
Jimmy, look, I don't think what he said was exactly right. I don't. We don't agree on that. He didn't lose his job for it. He said the MAGA crowd was trying to characterize the assassin as anything but one of them, because the 22-year-old kid, his family was MAGA. As if a 22-year-old with a trans girlfriend never rebelled against their family. I mean, but was he on the left? I don't know that either. And I hate to do this. I'm tipping the end of the show, which I work so hard on to keep a secret from the rest of the show. But it's too relevant. What I'm talking about at the end, I'm going to have to say now, which is that it is a fool's errand to try to say that these nuts who do these things are any...
Credit where it's due. Bill Maher has been one of the few voices willing to say what others won't. He argued that Jimmy Kimmel crossed a line, even as many comedians rushed to defend him and downplay the controversy. At the same time, Maher made it clear he didn't think Kimmel deserved to lose his job over it. That balance is what stood out. Kimmel ultimately wasn't fired. What happened looked more like a temporary suspension than a lasting consequence. And it's fair to question whether that move by ABC was as much about optics as it was about discipline, signaling accountability while leaving the door open for his return. Maher's willingness to call both sides of it, acknowledging the misstep without pushing for extreme consequences, is what separates his take from the rest.
Every right to be wrong, but look at this guy. He was doing video games with furries. He was on a game called Furry Shades of Gay 3. This kid is in his basement with VR goggles on, getting virtually ass-fucked by a cartoon wombat? And you're gonna put politics into this?
Bill Maher kept the pressure on with his sharp, understated jabs at Jimmy Kimmel, especially over Kimmel's attempt to frame the attack through a MAGA political lens. The point behind Maher's sarcasm was that Kimmel should have slowed down and done basic fact-checking instead of immediately turning a serious incident into a political talking point for effect. According to Maher, a quick pause would have shown that the situation didn't clearly fit into any political category at all. No confirmed MAGA connection, no obvious ideological motive, just a disturbed individual. In that framing, Kimmel's rushed commentary came off as more reactive than careful. That's why Maher's criticism landed the way it did. He wasn't just taking a swing at Kimmel. He was pushing the broader idea that accuracy matters more than narrative, especially on a major platform like ABC.
He doesn't belong in either party. He belongs in a straitjacket. He's an outpatient who should not be out. But you have the right to be wrong, or to have any opinion you want. That's what the First Amendment is all about. I was defending it last week on this show against what they're doing in England against the left.
There's a lot being asserted here, but it needs a more careful framing because several of the cause and effect claims aren't actually confirmed. The idea that Jimmy Kimmel was yanked off late-night TV directly because of a single set of comments, or that those remarks triggered a specific multi-billion-dollar stock drop at Disney, isn't something that's been clearly established. Stock movements happen constantly for many reasons at once, and they aren't usually traceable to one segment or statement in a clean, direct way. What is fair to say is that high-profile controversies involving major figures on ABC can create reputational pressure, and large media companies like Disney are always sensitive to audience reaction, advertisers, and broader investor sentiment. Those factors can influence internal discussions, but that's different from a single comment directly wiping billions, or automatically triggering a suspension. So rather than a simple story of punishment driven purely by stock performance, it's more accurate to view situations like this as the result of multiple overlapping pressures: public reaction, corporate risk management, and programming decisions, rather than one immediate financial shock dictating the outcome.
There's no organization. Antifa is a broad designation with no identifiable leader and no observable plan, like the Democrats. So Jimmy, let me just say, pal, you did a great, funny show for 2 decades. You should be proud of that. If this firing goes for you the way it did for me, you'll get 23 years.
Bill Maher didn't end his monologue without also taking aim at the Democratic Party. And, to be fair, that's become a familiar part of his style. Criticizing both sides rather than sticking to one lane. In his framing, the Democratic Party is struggling to maintain clarity and momentum in today's political environment. He suggested that, following recent election setbacks and internal disagreements, the party has had difficulty presenting a unified message or a clearly defined direction. From that perspective, his critique focuses less on specific policies and more on what he sees as a broader leadership and messaging problem: frequent internal conflict, reactive strategy, and an over-reliance on short-term attention-grabbing tactics instead of a consistent long-term narrative. It's the kind of commentary Maher often leans into, blunt, sweeping, and aimed at perceived institutional drift rather than individual figures.
He is letting the so-called comedy show return after a week's suspension. Some broadcasters are refusing to let his show back on air. Nexstar Media Group, which is the largest local TV broadcasting company in the US, announced that its stations will focus on continuing to produce local news and other programming relevant to their respective markets. What good news. Look, the company says, "We made a decision last week to preempt Jimmy Kimmel Live following what ABC referred to as Mr. Kimmel's ill-timed and insensitive comments at a critical time in our national discourse. We stand by that decision, pending assurance that all parties are committed to fostering an environment of respectful, constructive dialogue in the markets."
Some commentators are suggesting that there may be hesitation among certain media partners about carrying Jimmy Kimmel's program, largely out of concern over how controversies could impact their business relationships and audience response. In that view, even minor uncertainty can become a financial consideration for companies connected to ABC and its distribution network. From a business standpoint, that kind of caution isn't unusual. Media partners constantly weigh ratings, advertiser reactions, and brand alignment when deciding what content to support. If there is any hesitation, it would likely reflect that broader risk assessment rather than a single isolated incident. Beyond the financial angle, some argue this reflects a wider shift in audience expectations and media consumption habits. The idea is that viewers and advertisers are becoming more selective, and networks are more sensitive to backlash than before. Whether that signals a long-term cultural change or just a moment of heightened scrutiny is still up for debate, but it does highlight how closely entertainment decisions are tied to public perception and commercial pressure.
That makes up America's largest ABC affiliate groups announced that it would be preempting Jimmy Kimmel Live across ABC affiliate stations and replacing it with news programming. And you know what? They know that the audience has had enough of Jimmy Kimmel. Let's just look back at some of his comedy content. Here he is celebrating when they tried to censor Donald Trump.
Been suspended from Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and even Snapchat. But don't worry, Mr. President, there are still plenty of apps you do have access to. You still have Spotify to drown out the sound of millions of people cheering as you leave. You still have Pet Finder since you're on the outs with Mike Pence. You have Cameo, which will soon be your primary.
So what does all of this actually point to? In the broader conversation around Jimmy Kimmel, the reaction from Bill Maher, and the response from The View, you're really looking at a mix of media criticism, public controversy, and corporate decision-making, not just one simple storyline. Some commentators argue that decisions made by major companies like Disney and its network ABC are influenced by business pressure, audience reaction, and brand risk as much as anything else. Others push back on that interpretation, pointing out that entertainment and news environments are always shaped by multiple factors, not just immediate financial reactions or single events. What's clear is that figures like Maher have leaned into criticizing both media personalities and broader political or cultural trends, while shows like The View continue responding in real time to fast-moving headlines. Sometimes confidently, sometimes cautiously, depending on the situation and the end. Whether you see this as a sign of cultural change, media pressure, or just normal controversy cycles probably depends on perspective. But it does highlight one consistent theme. Modern media reactions unfold under constant scrutiny from audiences, advertisers, and executives all at once. And that brings us to the end of today's breakdown. If you found it interesting, feel free to like and subscribe for more. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.